Rick Rude was more than just a legendary wrestler, he was a man whose charisma and talent made him a star in the wrestling world. But behind the dazzling persona and the roaring crowds, Rick's life was marked by struggles that few fans ever saw. His final match wasn't just the last chapter in his wrestling career, it was the beginning of a painful and tragic decline. What followed was a heartbreaking journey that ultimately led to his untimely death. This is the story of how the pressures of fame, physical pain, and personal demons converged after that final moment in the ring, revealing a side of Rick Rude that few truly understood. It's a sobering reminder of the price many wrestlers pay behind the scenes. Early life, roots in Minnesota. Rick Rude, later known worldwide as the iconic, ravishing Rick Rude, was born Richard Erwin Rood on December 7, 1958, in the quiet, close-knit town of St. Peter, Minnesota. It was a place where the pace of life was steady and simple, shaped by hard work, modest dreams, and strong family ties. Rick's early years were steeped in these blue-collar values, which would form the backbone of his resilience and work ethic later in life. Rick's family soon moved to Robbinsdale, a typical suburban town outside Minneapolis, where he grew up in the warm, if sometimes chaotic, embrace of a large household. His parents worked tirelessly to support their 6 children, Rick, his brother Michael, and 4 sisters, creating an environment full of love, noise, and the everyday struggles of a hard-working family. Growing up in Robbinsdale meant being part of a community where school events, sports, and neighborly bonds shaped much of the daily rhythm. One of the pivotal influences in Rick's youth came through his friendship with Curt Hennig. Curt's father was Larry, the Axe, Hennig, a revered wrestler in the American Wrestling Association, AWA. And this connection gave Rick a front-row seat to the world of professional wrestling from a young age. Through stories shared over countless conversations, and occasional glimpses backstage at wrestling events, Rick's fascination with the sport was kindled. It wasn't just the spectacle of wrestling, it was the dedication, the physicality, and the sense of belonging to something bigger than himself. The road to wrestling, from education to the barroom bouncer. Graduating in 1976, Rick's path seemed clear. He enrolled at Anoka-Ramsey Community College to pursue a degree in physical education. The goal was simple and noble, to become a teacher or a coach and inspire young athletes as he had been inspired. Yet, life has a way of throwing curveballs, and Rick's future would take a detour that few could have predicted. His first real-world job after college was as a bouncer at Grandma B's, a gritty, no-nonsense bar in Minneapolis. Grandma B's was infamous. A tough haven for the city's working class, a place where tempers flared and fists flew. Being a bouncer here required more than just muscle, it demanded sharp instincts, quick thinking, and an unshakable presence. Rick wasn't just throwing people out, he was learning how to read a room, assert authority, and navigate conflict under pressure. What's fascinating about Grandma B's is that it was more than a bar, it was a crucible for wrestling talent in the early 1980s. Rick shared the night shift with several other future wrestling stars, Barry Darrow, John Nord, Michael Hegstrand, later known as Road Warrior Hawk, Joe Laurinaitis, Road Warrior Animal, and Scott Norton. They weren't just co-workers, they were brothers in arms, bonding over late-night shifts and shared dreams. This environment was a secret proving ground, a place where raw strength met burgeoning ambition. Around this time, Rick also found himself drawn to arm wrestling competitions. It wasn't just a pastime. It was a way to test his strength, sharpen his competitive edge, and build the kind of mental toughness that would serve him well under the bright lights of the wrestling world. The true turning point came courtesy of Eddie Cheyenne, the bar's bartender and a former wrestler who had cut his teeth in the 1960s with the AWA. Cheyenne was no ordinary bartender, he was a mentor and a gatekeeper to the wrestling world. Breaking into wrestling, the early years in Mid-Atlantic. Every wrestling legend has to start somewhere, and for Rick Rude, that beginning came on November 1, 1982, in Greenville, South Carolina. It wasn't a grand spectacle, but rather a gritty, unpolished clash against Joe Laurinaitis, who himself would later carve out his own legacy. The match ended in a draw, but more importantly, it marked the official start of Rick's professional wrestling journey. Back then, Rick wasn't yet Ravishing Rick Rood. He was Ricky Rood, a young man navigating the steep and often unforgiving learning curve of the wrestling business. His early days were far from the glitz and glamour the sport is known for today. Instead, they were filled with sweaty, smoky rooms in VFW halls, noisy nightclubs, and tiny wrestling clubs where the crowd was so close you could almost feel their breath. These were intimate venues, where every movement, every drop of sweat, every grimace was plain to see, and where Rick learned firsthand that wrestling was about more than just strength, it was about performance and connection. In these humble beginnings, Rick was often booked in opening matches. His job was clear: warm up the crowd and take the losses. It was a role many young wrestlers know well, the put-over guy, who helps build the credibility of established stars. Facing wrestlers like Sergeant Slaughter and Greg Valentine was intimidating. These men had been in the business for years and had perfected their craft. For Rick, every match, even in defeat, was a lesson. His impressive physique, the product of countless hours in the gym, was undeniable. But his in-ring skills were still raw. And he was just starting to understand how to tell a story through his movements and how to pace a match to keep the audience hooked. Georgia Championship Wrestling and Mid-South, finding his footing. By mid-1983, Rick found himself in Georgia Championship Wrestling, GCW, a territory known for its passionate fans and fierce competition. GCW was a significant step up in terms of exposure and skill level, offering Rick a chance to work alongside some of the best in the business. One of his early notable appearances was in a tag team tournament, where Rick teamed up with Joe Lightfoot. Their journey was short-lived, however, as they were swiftly eliminated by the Road Warriors, Michael Hegstrand, Animal, and Joe Laurinaitis, Hawk. The Road Warriors were already on their path to superstardom, with their fierce, dominating style that would become legendary. For Rick, this loss was another valuable experience, a clear benchmark of the kind of intensity and presence needed to compete at the top. While Rick's early television appearances often saw him playing the role of the underdog or jobber, who put over others, he did rack up some victories at house shows against solid mid-level talent like Bob Roop and Killer Tim Brooks. These wins helped him gain confidence and showcase that he wasn't just there to lose, he was learning how to build momentum, how to capitalize on opportunities, and how to slowly but surely carve out his own space. Rick's time in GCW wasn't just about wins and losses, it was about soaking up knowledge. Wrestling alongside and against top-tier talent sharpened his abilities and expanded his understanding of the business. Every match, whether a brief TV loss or a hard-fought house show win, was a step forward. Memphis Wrestling and the birth of Ravishing Rick Rood. The real turning point in Rick's career came with a move to the Continental Wrestling Association, CWA, in Memphis, a territory famous for its passionate and vocal fans, larger-than-life personalities, and theatrical style. This is where Rick shed the Ricky of his early career and emerged as Ravishing Rick Rood, a flamboyant, cocky, and magnetic heel who would captivate audiences. Mentored by the legendary manager Jimmy Hart, Rick reinvented himself completely. Gone were the simple trunks and tentative moves, in came flashy, Chippendale-inspired gear that screamed confidence and vanity. With his dazzling blonde valet angel by his side, Rick embodied arrogance and charm, strutting into the ring with the swagger of a man who knew he was the best and wasn't afraid to let everyone know it. His debut on January 24, 1984, was unforgettable. Rood stormed into the arena, claiming to be from Beverly Hills, California. A fabricated persona designed to add glamour and provoke the working-class Memphis crowd. With a commanding presence and sharp mic skills, he quickly dispatched local favorite Jerry Gray, setting the tone for his character's domination. The centerpiece of this period was a fierce and bitter rivalry with Austin Idol, one of Memphis's top stars and a charismatic showman in his own right. Their feud was about more than wrestling, it was a battle of egos and wits. Idol mocked Rood's vanity and physique, calling out the arrogance and flaunting his own rugged style. Rood responded with biting insults and theatrical antics that pushed the boundaries of heel behavior. Their matches were violent, emotional affairs, strap matches, steel cages, and humiliating stipulations that kept fans on the edge of their seats. One memorable match even required the loser to wear a dress, adding a layer of campy drama to their intense feud. Feud with Jerry Lawler, wrestling's greatest rivalry. By mid-1984, Ravishing Rick Rude had firmly established himself as one of the most captivating heels in the Memphis wrestling scene. But it was his fierce rivalry with Jerry Lawler, the beloved hometown hero and living legend of Memphis wrestling, that truly defined this stage of his career. Their feud ignited in June 1984 with a shock that sent the Memphis crowd into a frenzy. Rick, aided by his dazzling valet Angel and the muscle of his partner Jim Neidhart, pulled off a stunning upset by defeating Lawler to win the AWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. For the fans, this was no ordinary title change, it was a seismic clash of identities and loyalties. Lawler was more than a wrestler, he was Memphis. Rick was the arrogant outsider, the flashy invader who disrespected everything the fans held dear. From that moment on, their battles became the stuff of legend. Every match was a grueling, intense war, charged with emotion and a palpable sense of personal animosity. Rude's signature move of whipping Lawler with a leather strap wasn't just about inflicting pain, it was a symbolic act of humiliation, designed to rub salt in the wounds of the hometown hero. Their rivalry spilled beyond the ring, boiling over into brutal steel cage matches that had fans on the edge of their seats, desperate to see who would come out on top. The stakes escalated further when tragedy struck. During one particularly chaotic brawl, Angel, Rick's trusted valet and part of his persona, was seriously injured after Lawler delivered a devastating piledriver. The injury wasn't just a storyline, it sent real shockwaves through the wrestling community. Rude's reaction was explosive and unforgettable. A battle with Billy Jack Haynes, summer heat and new rivalries. With the Memphis feud behind him, Rude's career pressed on, and holding the Southern Heavyweight Championship painted a target on his back. One of his fiercest challengers was Billy Jack Haynes, a powerhouse wrestler known for his relentless drive and physicality. The summer months were sweltering, but the heat inside the ring was even more intense as the two collided in a series of brutal, high-stakes matches that pushed both men to their limits. The rivalry was as much about endurance and will as it was about skill. Fans were drawn to the spectacle of two titans locked in combat, their sweat and determination filling arenas across the region. The battles were gritty, physical, and emotionally charged, reflecting the raw toughness that defined wrestling in that era. However, as September rolled in and the summer heat gave way to cooler days, a new challenger emerged to shake things up, Wahoo McDaniel. Wahoo was no stranger to wrestling fans, he was a legend whose hard-hitting, no-nonsense style combined with his proud Native American heritage made him a compelling and unpredictable opponent. On October 2nd, under bright television lights and the watchful eyes of thousands, Wahoo faced Rude in a match that became instantly iconic. It was a clash of styles and spirits, a battle where raw emotion intertwined with sheer physical force. Wahoo wrestled the Southern Heavyweight Championship away from Rude, marking a turning point in the Florida wrestling scene. Heading west, a new frontier in world-class championship wrestling. In the world of professional wrestling, change is the only constant. Just as quickly as a referee's hand slaps the mat for a 3 count, fortunes can shift, careers can pivot, and legends can be born. For Rick Rude, the summer and early fall of 1985 marked a major turning point. Having battled through the hot, humid arenas of Florida, defending titles and facing fierce challengers, Rude and his ever-loyal manager Percy Pringle packed their bags and headed westward, to Dallas, Texas, to stake their claim in world-class championship wrestling, WCCW. At the time, WCCW was rapidly gaining momentum, evolving into one of the hottest and most dynamic wrestling promotions in the country. Known for its passionate, almost rabid fan base, hard-hitting matches, and dramatic storylines laced with emotion, WCCW offered something different, a more intense and visceral wrestling experience. For Rude, it wasn't just a change of scenery, it was an opportunity to reinvent himself, to prove he wasn't just a flash in the pan or a mid-card contender. This was his chance to dominate a new frontier. October 1985 marked his real debut in the Texas wrestling scene, and it was a far cry from the forgettable squash match he had suffered years before against Kamala. This time, Rick Rude arrived with a presence, poised, confident, and backed by the cunning mind of Percy Pringle. At the legendary Will Rogers Memorial Coliseum in Fort Worth, Rude swiftly dismantled Dave Peterson in a decisive victory, sending a clear message to the crowd and the locker room alike: the Ravishing one had arrived, and he was here to compete at the highest level. Climbing the ladder. Capturing the American Heavyweight Championship. After a brief but necessary warm-up period taking on lower-tier opponents, Rick Rude turned his sights toward the territory's most prestigious prize, the American Heavyweight Championship. At that time, the title was held by none other than Iceman King Parsons, a wrestler who was as charismatic as he was skilled. Parsons was a crowd favorite, known for his cool demeanor and slick in-ring style that combined technical prowess with showmanship. He was the kind of champion who not only defended his title fiercely but also connected with the fans on a level that made his matches feel electric. The collision course between Rude and Parsons was a classic clash of styles and personalities. Rude, the arrogant, calculating antagonist, against Parsons, the ice-cold fan favorite. The build-up to their encounter was electric, charged with tension as both men sought to assert dominance over the WCCW landscape. On November 11, back in Fort Worth, the stage was set. The crowd was buzzing, eager to see who would emerge victorious. Rude shocked the audience by defeating Parsons and capturing the American Heavyweight Championship. A victory that wasn't just about the gold but about sending a powerful signal. This wasn't just a win, it was a watershed moment that catapulted Rude into the spotlight and solidified him as a major player in the Texas wrestling scene. The victory marked the beginning of Rude's rise to dominance in WCCW, a territory renowned for tough competition and passionate fans. Now holding the territory's top prize, Rude embraced the role of the ruthless antagonist, the villain fans loved to hate. His persona, the ravishing Rick Rude, was a perfect blend of arrogance and charisma, making him one of the most compelling figures in the territory. A growing list of enemies, the Sunshine Saga and the Dangerous Alliance. But wrestling, at its core, is about conflict, and Rude's early reign in world class was marked by more than just championship glory. It was about rivalries that drew fans in week after week, storylines filled with twists, betrayals, and escalating violence. One of the most bizarre and unforgettable chapters of this period involved the missing link, a wild, unpredictable wrestler who had been part of manager Percy Pringle's stable. The missing link was a force of nature, a hulking figure whose unpredictability made him a valuable ally. However, in a shocking twist, the missing link abandoned Pringle and Rude's faction. Instead, he allied himself with the enigmatic and charismatic wrestler known simply as Sunshine, a fan favorite whose mysterious aura and cunning tactics made him a formidable adversary. The fallout was immediate and explosive. Feeling betrayed, Rude and Pringle launched a brutal attack on the missing link, escalating tensions within the promotion to new heights. Sunshine, fiercely loyal to his new ally, retaliated in a way that would etch itself into wrestling history, storming the ring wielding a mace. The presence of a weapon added a new level of danger and unpredictability to the feud, elevating the stakes and pushing the storyline into more intense and dramatic territory. What might have been a straightforward wrestling rivalry instead became a complex saga. The conflict drew in multiple characters, alliances shifted, and the drama expanded beyond the ring, captivating fans and keeping them on the edge of their seats. This story wasn't just about wrestling matches, it was about power, loyalty, and survival in a ruthless world. Wrestling history in flux, the birth of the World-Class Championship Wrestling Association. The world of professional wrestling in the mid-1980s was in the midst of seismic change. It was a time when traditions that had shaped the sport for decades began to crumble and new, bold directions emerged. One of the most defining moments came in late 1985, when Jim Crockett Jr. took control of the National Wrestling Alliance, NWA, the storied coalition of regional wrestling promotions that had long maintained the status quo of traveling world champions and shared territories. This new leadership under Crockett marked the end of an era. The NWA, once a vast and loosely coordinated network, was shifting toward a more centralized model, threatening the independence of some of its key territories. Among those territories was World-Class Championship Wrestling, WCCW, based in Texas, which made the bold and unprecedented decision to break away from the NWA entirely. This was no small move, it was a statement of independence and ambition. In doing so, they formed a new promotion called the World-Class Championship Wrestling Association, WCCWA. The birth of WCCWA brought with it significant changes, both in structure and in how championships were handled. To solidify the promotion's identity and draw attention, they crowned their last American heavyweight champion, Rick Rude, as their first ever world heavyweight champion. This was a massive vote of confidence, signaling the company's trust in Rude's charisma, in-ring ability, and appeal to lead the promotion into this new era. But the WCCWA also introduced a critical and innovative rule change designed to shake things up. Champions would no longer be able to retain their titles if they lost by disqualification. This rule aimed to prevent crafty wrestlers like Rude, known for bending the rules and exploiting loopholes, from relying on underhanded tactics to keep their championships. Instead, it forced a more honest, hard-fought style of competition, raising the stakes and making every match more unpredictable and thrilling for fans. The Parade of Champions, Chaos and Controversy at Texas Stadium. May 4, 1986, was a landmark night in Texas wrestling history. The iconic Texas Stadium, known for hosting Dallas Cowboys games and large-scale events, became the battleground for WCCWA's third annual Parade of Champions. This grand spectacle was more than just a wrestling show, it was a celebration of the sport's larger-than-life personalities and fierce competition. Rick Rude put his newly minted World Heavyweight Championship on the line against one of the most feared and chaotic figures in wrestling history, Bruiser Brody. Brody was a towering man whose unpredictable brawling style and intimidating presence made him a nightmare for opponents. Their match was an all-out war from the opening bell. The chaos began almost immediately. Percy Pringle, ever the scheming manager, tried to interfere to tilt the odds in Rude's favor, but Brody wasn't having any of it. He dragged Pringle into the ring, escalating the pandemonium. Then, in a dramatic moment, Brody sent Rude hurtling over the top rope, a move that, under the new WCCWA rules, automatically resulted in a disqualification. Ironically, the very rule designed to keep Rude honest and fighting fairly had just saved his title once again. Instead of losing the championship, Rude walked away holding his belt, while the crowd was left stunned and roaring with excitement. But the match didn't end there. What followed was a wild, chaotic brawl as Brody chased Rude and Pringle through the stadium's tunnels. Other wrestlers had to scramble to restore order, adding to the sense of unpredictability that had become synonymous with WCCWA events. This night was a vivid reminder of how volatile the wrestling world was, and how Rude thrived in the eye of the storm. Double champion and new challenges, the television title and Brody's revenge. Rick Rude's momentum in world-class championship wrestling was unstoppable. Just one day after capturing the prestigious World Heavyweight Championship, he added another crown to his collection, the World-Class Television Championship, by defeating Lance Von Erich. Holding two titles simultaneously wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a bold statement. Rude was no longer just a top contender, he was the undisputed face of Texas wrestling, a dominant force commanding respect and fear in equal measure. Wearing both the World Heavyweight and Television Champion belts elevated Rude's star power to new heights. Fans saw a man at the peak of his abilities, blending athleticism with cunning and charisma. It was a rare feat that few wrestlers ever achieve, and for Rude, it seemed like the sky was the limit. But with great power came even greater challenges. Bruiser Brody, a towering, wild, and unpredictable brawler, was far from finished with his grudge against Rude. Their clash wasn't just about titles, it was personal, fueled by animosity that spilled into every encounter. Just 2 weeks after Rude's double championship triumph, Brody and Rude faced off again in a rematch charged with raw emotion and intensity. This wasn't going to be a clean, straightforward contest. The tension in the arena was palpable, fans on the edge of their seats as the two warriors battled fiercely. In a historic first under the newly enforced WCCWA rules, Rood lost the television title by disqualification. The new rule meant that championships could no longer change hands on a DQ, but this time the outcome gave Brody the clear upper hand, swinging momentum firmly in his favor. The fall of a partnership, the Kane incident and fractures with Pringle. In the unpredictable world of professional wrestling, where alliances often shift as quickly as momentum in the ring, few moments stand out as sharply as the one that fractured the bond between Rick Rude and his longtime manager, Percy Pringle. For years, Pringle had been the mastermind behind Rude's success, the calculating figure guiding the Ravishing one's path to glory with a mix of cunning tactics and unwavering loyalty. But even the strongest partnerships can crack under pressure, and when they do, it's as dramatic and emotional as any match. The incident happened during a crucial title match against a wrestler named Adams. The stakes were high, Rude was fighting to keep his World Heavyweight Championship. And the tension in the arena was thick enough to cut with a knife. Just as the match reached a fever pitch, referee David Manning was knocked out cold, leaving the contest momentarily without its authoritative eye. Seizing this chaotic opportunity, Percy Pringle climbed the ropes, wielding his iconic cane with the intention to swing the match decisively in Rude's favor. It was classic Pringle, a moment of cunning interference disguised beneath a veneer of theatricality. The crowd held its breath, knowing this was the kind of moment where Rude's championship reign could be solidified, or come crashing down. But fate, as often in wrestling and life, had a cruel twist in store. At the last possible moment, Adams moved out of the way, and instead of hitting his opponent, Pringle's cane struck Rude squarely. The sound echoed through the arena, a sickening crack that stunned everyone watching. Rude staggered, dazed and vulnerable, the shock rippling through the crowd. Adams wasted no time, capitalizing on the moment to pin Rude and claim the World Heavyweight Championship. The arena was filled with a mix of disbelief and tension, the air thick with the unspoken realization that something had just gone irreparably wrong. Struggles and shifting alliances, from Sister Nancy to Dingo Warrior. Despite the star power Rick Rude wielded and the fan adulation he enjoyed, the tides in wrestling can shift quickly and unexpectedly. Even for a man as talented and charismatic as Rude, success was never guaranteed, and new challenges loomed on the horizon. During this period, Rude's real-life sister Nancy played an important and grounding role in his career. Known to fans as Raven, she served as his valet, a presence at ringside who brought not only family loyalty but also a touch of genuine connection to the often theatrical world of wrestling. Nancy's support gave Rude a humanizing dimension, blending the personal with the professional and reminding the audience that beneath the glitz and drama, these were real people with real relationships. However, outside of family, alliances proved far less stable. Rude's partnership with the enigmatic Dingo Warrior began with promise. Warrior was a larger-than-life character, full of energy and intensity, and their alliance hinted at a powerful new chapter for Rude. But in a move that shook the roster and left Rude vulnerable, Warrior turned babyface, good guy, abandoning Rude and leaving him isolated just when the stakes were rising. Around the same time, Rude tried his hand in tag team competition, pairing up with the rugged Joss LeDuc for a tag tournament. It was a strange pairing, a mismatch in styles and personalities, and the chemistry never quite clicked. Their partnership ended abruptly in the first round, losing to the Young Blood brothers in a disappointing and symbolic defeat. The loss felt like a sign, this chapter of Rude's career was losing momentum, and change was inevitable. A new horizon. Joining Jim Crockett Promotions and the WWF debut. Change, as it often does, arrived in the form of a new opportunity. October 1986 saw Jim Crockett Promotions rising to prominence, having taken control of both the Mid-Atlantic and Georgia territories, consolidating power within the National Wrestling Alliance, NWA. For Rick Rude, this was more than just a geographical shift, it was a chance to elevate his career to wrestling's biggest stages. With Crockett now at the helm, the NWA World Championship beckoned, offering Rood the chance to compete against some of the biggest names in the industry and cement his legacy on a national level. But before making his mark in the NWA, another door opened, the World Wrestling Federation, WWF. On June 7, 1987, Rick Rude made his WWF debut at Sacramento's Arco Arena. The debut was a success, marked by a solid win over Jose Estrada, but more importantly, it was the beginning of a reinvention. Joining Bobby Heenan's infamous stable, Rude quickly evolved from just a skilled competitor to a complete entertainer. His wrestling matches became just part of the show, his persona was becoming legendary. Rude's entrance was unforgettable. He ditched the smooth operator music in favor of a sultry, almost provocative stripper's theme. Before every match, he would command the music to stop suddenly, turning his attention to the crowd. His biting insults targeted the men, while his promise of an unforgettable show was aimed squarely at the women. Then, in slow, deliberate fashion, he would remove his robe, flaunting his sculpted physique and revealing tights emblazoned with his own face, an image that polarized audiences and perfectly encapsulated the ravishing persona. The rise of a WWF star and the Jake Roberts feud. The WWF was careful to build Rude's star slowly but steadily. Initially, he was mostly featured on the house show circuit, gaining experience and exposure, often teaming with Heenan's other notable stars like Paul Orndorff and King Kong Bundy. By the fall of 1987, Rude had become a regular fixture on television, setting the stage for some of the most compelling storylines of his career. Early 1988 saw Rude testing himself against the biggest names in wrestling. He scored impressive victories over beloved stars like Junkyard Dog and Tito Santana, and even held his own against legends like Hulk Hogan and Ricky Steamboat. But it was an added element to his character, the rude awakening kiss, that took his persona to a whole new level. After each victory, Rude would select a woman from the crowd and plant a kiss on her. It was a provocative, sometimes shocking gesture that ignited the audience, especially the men, who hated being taunted by the cocky and confident Rude. The kiss became a trademark moment, embodying the arrogance and charm that made him one of the most captivating villains, of the era. Then came one of the most personal and dramatic moments of his WWF career. On March 19, 1988, at Missouri's Show Me Center, Rude was in the ring for a quick victory over Reno Riggins. But the real drama unfolded as Rude and Bobby Heenan spotted a striking woman dressed in white sitting ringside, someone who refused to come to the ring despite Rude's taunts and coaxing. "Your one click can help us keep creating awesome stuff.